Egypt news now, and you remember Egypt, Andy?
Oh, yeah.
Country with the pointy houses, slightly creepily fond of cats. The Bangles liked the way they walked. You know the place. Well, they were, of course, one of the highest profile participants in the Arab Spring last year, a spring which hasn't been quite as bouncy as many Egyptians would have liked, especially as it currently seems like they're currently boinging their way back towards dictatorship. And as we talked about before, Mohamed Morsi has given himself sweeping new powers, calling them an early Christmas present to himself, which was extra suspicious considering the fact that he is definitely a Muslim, Andy. He's a card-carrying Muslim. Sorry, did I say card? I meant Quran. He's a Quran-carrying Muslim. 2013 is shaping up to be another spicy year for Egyptians, with Tahrir Square looking more and more like a permanent campsite. Life is set to be increasingly difficult for Egypt as a decline in the value of their currency is causing widespread inflation. And Mohamed Morsi and his Muslim Brotherhood government may pay quite a political price for that. Weeks of political turmoil and violent protests had already damaged the Egyptian economy, which was, not in the best shape of its life in the first place. The Egyptian economy is essentially like the Sphinx, Andy. It looks remarkably good from a distance, but when you get up close, you realise that half its face is falling off. Panicked investors and ordinary Egyptians have rushed to switch their Egyptian pounds into foreign currency, and Morsi's big problem is that he's faced a huge backlash over his fast-tracking of the new Egyptian constitution, which many see as being more repressive than a Victorian parent. And his current unpopularity means that he now can't afford to introduce the tax rises that he can't afford not to. He has postponed tax increases, which were believed to be part of an austerity package vitally needed to secure an IMF fund loan of $4.8 billion. So essentially he's got a choice, Andy. The IMF loan is viewed as vital to dig the country out of its financial crisis, but to get the loan, he'd have to almost certainly press ahead with massively unpopular measures. So he's starting to understand what freedom is all about, Andy, you see? That's what being a modern leader in a democracy is like. Your job is essentially to choose between eating a shit kebab or a shit souffle. Isn't democracy fun?
And the poor of Egypt, once again getting a little bit exercised about the impact of these problems on them, because it is they who get hit hardest by this inflation, John. Yet again, the silly old poor never seem to learn their lesson from economic history, and the poor, very much in Egypt and around the world, remain the world's testicles in any economic smash in the balls.
It must be very frustrating for Morsi, because if you're a dictator and people start to get all testy about trivial issues such as the price of food, you just roll a few tanks through a marketplace and boom, problem solved. And if not problem solved, then at least problem silenced, which is basically problem solved. But he mustn't forget, though, there is a genuine plus side to running a country in a democracy, and that is that when you lose an election, you're generally not murdered and your body isn't dragged through the streets. So, swings and roundabouts. And it does seem that the powers that be in Egypt are responding to this uncertainty by going back to doing what they do best, restricting freedom of speech. That is a club they've always got in their bag, Andy. Whenever they get into trouble, they can just pull it out, swing it around a bit and problem solved. Or, problem silenced, and you know what they say about that. But a popular Egyptian comedian called Bassem Youssef is currently being investigated by prosecutors for allegedly insulting the president. Now, I happen to know this guy, Andy. He's come to New York a few times, and I see him whenever he's here, and knowing him, he probably did insult the president, Andy. But guess what, Morsi? That is another shit sandwich that you have to learn to chomp down. Because when you're a democratic leader, people are going to call you an arsehole, and you just have to take it. At least in this case, you were actually being an arsehole, so it shouldn't hurt too much. It's when you're not being an arsehole, and you get called one anyway, that is when it really can bother you, and it's by withstanding that level of baseless abuse that is where truly great leaders are forged.
So what are the reasons behind Egypt's economic problems? Well, I guess you've got to look at 30 years of dictatorship, the ensuing social and political unrest and upheaval, uncertainty about the future, not enough sphinxes anymore, having blown everything it once earned, building great triangular tombs to plonk dead pharaohs in, and the lingering ripple effects of the various plagues God sent to the Egyptians all those years ago. I mean, they've never fully recovered as a nation from the locusts or the frogs or the deaths of an entire generation of firstborn potential wage earners, entrepreneurs and taxpayers, particularly not after that all enabled their imported foreign workforce to skip the country. I mean, that's a big economic upheaval, John. That's going to take you at least 10,000 years to recover from. And this, John, harrowingly puts everything into economic perspective. Data has showed that Egypt's 5-year credit default swaps jumped from 27 basis points to 4.5-month highs from the previous close to 515 basis points. And
that's terrible unless it's good.
I couldn't have put it any better myself.
I don't know how to feel about that.
Yeah.
Oh, I do. It's confused. Confused and slightly irritated. A formal complaint was brought against Bassem Youssef for undermining the standing of President Morsi in his television show by an Islamist lawyer and a gaggle of angry sheiks. I think that's the collective noun for a group of angry sheiks, isn't it, Andy? I can't remember. It's either that or a squawk of angry sheiks. Anyway, after Bassem made fun of them for their complaints, they came back at him even harder, accusing him of sexual immorality and poor hygiene. Now, I don't know which of them is worse, Andy. Together, they're certainly unforgivable.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite impressive to be able to do the one whilst also suffering from the other, I guess, isn't it?
Exactly. They've called him Bassem Zipper, the varmint, and claimed that he doesn't know how to wash after he uses the bathroom. Listen, Andy, that's a big allegation. And it happens to be one that I have a little personal information on. Because I've been close to Bassem on more than one occasion, certainly well within sniffing distance, and I can tell you, he smells divine, Andy. Like a wet forest, or a puppy wearing high-end aftershave. So those sheiks shouldn't be lashing out in anger unless they've got the fragrance evidence to back that shit up. So
well, it's good to see this level of playground insults.
Yes.
In, kind of life and death political arguments.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
These things too easily get too serious. Yeah.
But look, in response to all this bullshit, and, in case Bassem does get taken in for questioning, we, as a Bugle, are going to step up. We've stepped up to make fun of Mubarak in the past. We can step up again to make fun of Morsi. Honestly, their names are so similar, we could probably just switch them out and use the same jokes and no one would notice. But we're not going to do that. So for Bassem and the people of Egypt, and to ensure that Andy and I are never going to be able to take a trip to see the pyramids, let's do this. When he was a child, Mohammed Morsi says he can remember riding to school on a donkey. That's strange, because that donkey remembers riding to school with a douche on his back. Boom! Mohammed Morsi has a PhD in material science from USC. That's interesting, because I have a PhD in... Shut up about your PhD, Mohammed Morsi! No one gives a shit! Boom! He apparently titled his dissertation High Temperature Electrical Conductivity and Defect Structure of Donor-Doped Al2O3. He subtitled it, otherwise known as the reason no girls ever want to have sex with me. Boom, boom, boom! Hey, Mohammed, how do you spell democracy? I'll give you a clue. It's not spelt Y-O-U. Boom! Hey, Mohammed, what's black, white and red all over? Your country's budget. Boom, 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 boom! Hey, how many Mohammed Morsis does it take to change a light bulb? None. He gets servants to do it. He's completely out of touch with his people. Boom! What can you say about a man who's admired, loved and respected by everyone? You can say that man is not Mohammed Morsi! Boom, Andy, boom, boom, boom!
And, John, do you think, is this helping your friend Bassem Youssef, do you think?
I guess time will tell, Andy.
Yeah.
I've just got one more joke, and let's see if this will calm the situation down. Mohammed Morsi is actually married to his cousin. I don't need to say anything about that. By Western values, it's a bit weird. Boom! Boom! It can't have hurt, can it? What, it can? Oh, shit.